This is an audio recording of Bob the Photographer by Arthur M. Winfield, narrated by Right Here Audio. Chapter 29. Bob Hears Interesting News. The old man had been struck in the head with a heavy stick which lay close at hand. "Hello? Who did this?" cried Bob as he leaned over the old man. "Casco, the villain!" gasped old Blake. "Too bad," returned the young photographer kindly. "Let me examine the wound." "Catch the rascal first. He has stolen the papers," cried the old man. "He must not get away with them." "Where is he?" "He went off in that direction." Old Blake pointed with his long, bony finger toward one of the other islands. Then he tried to rise, but fell back in a faint in Bob's arms. By the time Frank had arrived on the scene, he did not know Blake, but he surmised that the old man had been another of Casco's victims. "Tend to him, Frank, while I go after Casco," said Bob. "I'll whistle if I want you." Pistol in hand, the young photographer made his way through the willows and over the rocks until, jumping a shallow spot in the water, he landed on one of the other islands. A noise ahead told him that Casco was not far off, but as Bob plunged on, the sound suddenly ceased and all became profoundly silent. "I'll bet a hat he has taken to the water again," said Bob to himself. Reaching the edge of the second island, the young photographer found his surmise correct. There, halfway to the north shore, was Casco in his boat, pulling with all his strength. A minute later, Casco reached shore and disappeared from view. "Gone!" groaned Bob, "and with Frank's $1,800 too." The youth felt almost as bad as if the loss had been his own. Frank Lands was his dearest friend, and although the young man was rich, Bob knew the loss of the money would be a sore trial to him. When the young photographer returned to where he had left Frank and old Blake, he found that his friend had bound up the old man's forehead with a wet rag torn from his coat sleeve. Blake was as pale as death and could scarcely move, yet he opened his eyes anxiously when Bob approached. "Did you get him?" he asked feebly. "No." "Didn't you see Casco?" asked Frank. "Yes, he escaped to the shore." Frank's face fell and Blake gave a groan. "The papers gone," muttered the old man. "Gone, and Barker promised me $500 for them." "What's that?" asked Bob with sudden interest. "Nothin'," mumbled Blake, but he eyed the youth in a dreamy, speculative way for a long while after. Bob and Frank now held a consultation. It was obvious that they could not leave Blake alone. The old man might die if left without somebody to nurse him. "If you will remain, I will go after Casco," said Frank. "As soon as I reach shore, I will get somebody to drive me over to Dartonville, and from there I will telegraph to the city for a couple of detectives. This chase has lasted long enough. I will pay a couple of $100 out of my own pocket to run down Casco and his gang." Bob agreed to remain behind, and in a minute more, Frank was off, pulling for the shore as hard as his tired arms would permit. "Are you in the habit of coming to this island?" asked Bob of Blake when the old man was able to sit up. "Sometimes," was the slow response. "Is there any sort of shelter here?" Blake was silent for a moment. "Why do you ask?" he questioned at length. "Because if there was, I might take you to it and make you comfortable. You are not very comfortable out here on these damp rocks. There is a cave hut just back of here. Take me to that, please." As Blake spoke, a dizziness seemed to come over him, and he closed his eyes. Bob waited until the spell was over, and then half-carried, half-dragged the old man to the place he had mentioned. The young photographer found that a large hollow under a shelving rock had been converted into a dwelling place by having a front of logs built up against it. There was a door and a window, and entering the former, Bob discovered a cot, a table, and a couple of chairs, while a number of pans and dishes lay heaped up in a corner. The youth placed Blake on the cot and made him as comfortable as the conveniences of the cave hut permitted. Blake pointed to a flask resting on a shelf, and when the youth handed it to him, the old man took a deep draught of liquor it contained. It appeared to brace him up. The color came back into his face, and presently he sat up. "So you say Casco got away with those papers?" he said slowly. "He got away. I knew nothing of any papers. He ought to let me have 'em back." "What did the papers contain?" "Never mind." "They ought to be pretty valuable if Barker offered you $500 for them. Who said he did?" "You did." "I was only fooling. They ain't worth anything to anybody but me." "How long have you known Barker?" went on Bob, seating himself beside the old man. "Longer than I care to remember." Did you ever know Peter Thompson? Yes. What do you know about my past history? The young photographer asked the question boldly, watching Blake intently as he did so. He saw the old man start up and then fall back. Who said I knew anything about your history? He said sharply. I say so, Blake. Come, you had better tell me all. I'm willing to nurse you and see you through, but I want the truth from you, and unless I get it, you shall go to prison. No, no! I say yes. But Sarah! You mean your daughter? Do you know her? I know of her. What will Sarah say? I believe she has been at you to turn over a new leaf, Blake. So she has. And the old man sighed. Then why don't you do it? For a long time Blake was silent. Bob could see that he was undergoing a severe mental struggle. At last he heaved a long sigh. I will tell you all I know, he said, but you must promise to protect me against Barker. I will do that. If he found I had exposed him, he might kill me. It will not be long before Barker is in prison and the others with him. That's where they ought to be. But tell me what you know, went on Bob impatiently. I first met Barker about 10 or 12 years ago, began old Blake. Where? At the house of Robert Perry, your uncle in Buffalo? Robert Perry. Is he still alive? No, he died shortly after Barker came there. Who is my father? He was Thomas Perry, Robert's brother. He was a captain in the United States Army, and he was killed in an Indian raid in the Black Hills. And my mother? I don't know anything of her. Your father met her out west and married. When he was killed, you, a mere baby, was sent to your uncle's home. The report was that your mother was also killed by the Indians, but your uncle could never learn the exact truth of that statement. Then she may be alive? Yes. I believe Barker knows for certain. Chapter 30. Bob learns something of the past. Never had Bob listened to words that interested him more. Here, at last, was news concerning his identity. His real name was Bob Perry, and he was the son of an officer. It was not known for certain whether his mother was dead or not. Supposing she was alive? A lump arose in Bob's throat at the mere thought. You say you think Barker knows? He said quickly. Yes. Then I'll make Barker speak, was the young photographer's determination. Blake took another pull at his flask and then continued. Barker pretends that he is the son of a sister of your father and Robert Perry, a sister who immigrated to Montana with a man named Barker. He pretends? Yes, pretends. For Casco found out that old Barker had no children when he died. That gave him a hold on Barker. I see. Go on. Grogan knew Barker before he turned up at your uncle's place. He once told me when he was full of liquor that Barker's real name was Bill Dix, and that he was a Virginia outlaw, wanted for shooting a man in Petersburg. And that gave Grogan his hold on Barker? It did, but all three are hard customers and will do anything to get money. I found that out. But why did Barker pretend to be my uncle's nephew? Because your uncle was a bachelor, very old and worth a pile of money. He thought if he could get you out of the way, he would come in for part, if not all, of the fortune. And how did he get me out of the way? In a rather roundabout fashion. I was working for your uncle at the time, and Sarah, my daughter, who was married to a young man named Paul Marks, was working for a woman named Rose. This Mrs. Rose had a child sick with scarlet fever, and just at that time you were similarly stricken. My daughter was told by the doctor that Mrs. Rose's child could not live. Barker heard of this, and one day, when your uncle had to go to New York on important business, he had the two children changed, paying Mrs. Rose quite some money for the transaction. Did your daughter know of the exchange? She never knew, but she expected something was wrong and often asked me. The day Mrs. Rose's child was taken to your uncle's house, it died, and as everyone was afraid of scarlet fever, no one came in from the neighborhood, and the little one was buried the next day, the doctor making out a certificate without viewing the corpse. And I was taken to Mrs. Rose's house. Yes. My daughter wanted to nurse you, but Mrs. Rose pretended to want to do the nursing herself and would not let my daughter in the room. I believe the plan was to poison you, but you got well rapidly, and Mrs. Rose did not have the heart to poison you, but sent you off to an orphan asylum instead. But how did I get to old Thompson's? Barker and Mrs. Rose quarreled about a month later, and that very day you were taken from the orphan asylum by somebody, and then I lost track of you. No doubt it was Barker's work, said Bob, remembering what Mary Ridley, who had worked for Peter Thompson, had told him. What became of Mrs. Rose? She died of heart failure, brought on by the excitement of the quarrel. At least that is what they said. Perhaps Barker poisoned her. He is such a wretch. And did he get possession of my uncle's property? He got possession of only a small part of it. The rest remains somewhere, tied up in the courts. Barker could not produce satisfactory evidence in regard to his identity, and besides, he did not have those papers I spoke about. What papers are they? They pretend to prove that your mother was killed as well as your father. The package also has a number of letters from Barker to Mrs. Rose relating to the changing of the children. I was holding them to get money, but that's all over now. How did you learn of all this? By prying around and following Barker, whom I did not like from the start. Then I got to drinking, and Barker and Casco made me their tool. I tried to reform several times because Sarah wanted me to, but the appetite for liquor was too strong. But now I'm done with it forever. As Blake finished, he caught up the flask, which was still half full of liquor, and hurled it with all his strength against the rocky back wall of the hut. It was smashed into 100 pieces, and the liquor splashed in all directions. I swear that from now on I'm going to lead a different life, went on the old man, and if you will help me, I'll do what I can to bring that gang to justice and assist you in getting your inheritance. And in finding my mother, if she be alive? Added Bob. Blake, give me your hand. From now on, we are firm friends. The two shook hands. More conversation followed, and then Bob started up a fire, for the air about the hut was damp, and finding some coffee, made a couple of hot cupfuls, both of which were relished. The young photographer asked Blake how he had come to locate on the islands, and was told that the old man at time grew utterly disgusted with himself and the world, and had found on such occasion a haven of rest there. "Do you think you can stand if I row you to the mainland?" asked Bob when it was nearly noon. "I reckon so, but you'll have to put me to bed somewhere after that. I'll take good care of you, Blake. You'll find my boat over in a hollow back of these rocks." Bob procured the craft, and then, exerting all of his strength, carried Blake to it and sat him down in the stern. Quarter of an hour later, they drew up to the spot where Bob had found the other boat. Here, a fat farmer was looking around in perplexity for his craft. "Say, does you vos see mine boats?" he asked. "Yes, I borrowed it," said Bob. "I will pay you for its use." "Oh, that's all right then. I vos drinking it was drifted away, isn't it?" "It's over to the other shore, but tell me, do you live here?" "Sure, right over there." And the German jerked his thumb over his shoulder. "This man has been hurt in the head. If you will take him in and send for a doctor, I'll be very thankful and settle all bills." "Sure, I took him in. Carl." At this call, a boy even fatter than his father appeared. "Run and tell your mother, a gentleman vos got hurt, and to get a bed ready kvik." "Ja, father." The boy went off, and Bob, assisted by the German farmer, lifted old Blake out of the boat and carried him up to the farmhouse. Here the old man placed on a soft feather bed, and Carl was set off for the nearest doctor. Bob left a $20 bill behind to pay for all immediate charges, and then bidding Blake keep a stout heart, he hired a horse and buggy from the German farmer and set off for Dartonville. It was a good hour's drive, but Bob did not mind that, being busy thinking over all Blake had told him. I must corner Barker and make him tell me the whole truth, was his one conclusion. If Mother is alive, I want to know it. I'm not going to be a nobody any longer. Halfway to Dartonville, Bob met Frank driving a bay horse at a furious rate. "I have telegraphed for the detectives," said the young man. "They will be on hand this evening." "Then what is your awful hurry?" "I have a clue as to the whereabouts of Barker, Grogan, and that fair ground swindler. Come along and I will tell you how I caught it." Bob eagerly assented, and the two turned off into a side road leading to a hilly district rather hard to travel. On the way, Frank explained how he had got on the track. While telegraphing at Dartonville, a stranger had sent a message to Stampton. He had written out the message twice, throwing the first sheet away. The stranger's manner excited my curiosity, Frank went on, and I picked up the slip. It read, "Meeting at the Red House on Rayville Road. B, G, and C there. Tomorrow sure." I knew it meant Barker, Grogan, and Casco. "They have some big plan on hand. returned Bob, "and we must stop their evil work. Let us drive as fast as we can." On and on they went, Bob on the way relating to Frank what old Blake had confessed. "They are indeed a set of villains," returned the young man, "Hold up!" He drew rein, and Bob followed suit. They had just passed a crossroad, and looking down it, they discovered a crowd coming towards them, composed of Barker, Grogan, Raymond, and Casco.